The Olden World, Video 5. A swirling little bubble was making its way to the surface of the turquoise. Abel was trying to imagine what kind of a sphere was an infinitesimal world such as this. What small creatures could exist within those confines? Would it be wonderfully different than here? Does better go from small to large, or was his immensely bigger world better, prettier? Were those creatures perhaps more intelligent? That was as far as Abel's mind wandered consciously, for the abstraction of his own world was peculiar. Abel conceded that he himself was quite insignificant to that greater macrocosm, that impenetrable bubble of life he called atmosphere. He wished to escape this little bubble of existence. He would gladly at this moment trade his sterile world for that drifting wisp, which at least assured him of escape. The ever-drowning reality of atmosphere now becoming unbearable. Just then an insignificant silence occurred, and an entire cosmos was quietly engulfed with its surrounding ether as the water filled the vacuum of space that once filled the little world of bubble. Abel felt tears as they tingled his cheeks. It felt good to cry. A sense of relief intimated the bubble world's acceptance of Abel's grief. Probably they were better off, he thought assuringly to his heart, for they too had no doubt sought that release, that God had answered their prayer. Their spirits released to the universal world where all spirits meet at judgment. Abel felt assured now that God would deliver him as well. Soon he too would see his ransom price paid. Abel longed for paradise, his thoughts still wandering purposefully in search of understanding. Just then Abel's little bubble was reverberated by the resonance of another distraction. Abel turned his head in the direction of the alarm, and it was his brother. And Abel recognized Cain, perhaps for some idiotic, purposeless reason that time and chance had forgotten. Perhaps Abel intuitively realized from some maturing quality of the fate, this cosmic destiny and drama, that all God's creatures seem to play out unwillingly, yet reservedly. Nevertheless, Abel did recognize Cain, in spite of the grotesque nature of his brother and his hideous markings of disguise, and Abel knew something was up. Now the drama of life would be played out for the future generations to rehash. Here was the good one against the evil twin. Here was the cosmic drama being played upon Abel and his strange circumstances. Being the prodigies of his bewildered mind, Cain had been hoodwinked by Satan. The final act always progressing towards its finality. The impending doom always releasing its imminence. For that certain vice of its endlessness, yes, it favored the agonizing, tormenting death of eternal punishment rather than that other less universally accepted theory of absolute annihilation. For thus does the drama play on and on. "What do you want, Cain?" Abel beckoned. "Have you come to finish me? The one work that you started on earth? Shall I follow you somewhere to die? Oh, would that I embrace you at this moment, for I have so much love for you, my only brother. Dearest Cain, you are great now, aren't you? Have you too gone over to the dark side completely? I knew from our childhood that you would. But as you can see, I'm not afraid of you. In fact, I welcome you. Are you not simply my fate? 'Tis not objective for me to run from that, for then I should have died twice, once for my body and another for my dignity. But alas, O wicked Cain, I shall not die twice. I shall keep my dignity, nor shall I think to die even once. For my plan is to win you at this battle. I have come for my vengeance. I have cried out to God day and night for this moment, and I see he has answered me herein, that he has allowed me to perceive thy countenance. please grant me this wish and come hither. I wish to embrace you now, so that I might gladly squeeze your insides right out of your deformed tabernacle." Cain hesitated curiously. "No, Abel, my brother, I've not gone over to the darkness. Not in the least as much as you. For we have both succumbed to this wily, and I have only come to warn you of your fate, which is not in the least in danger of me. 'Tis your wife, Aquila. She is the fault with you. It is she who has made you fall to these depths of seeking this vengeance from me. While on my side of this degeneration there is this Lilith. I have left her, for she was not true by me, but she is Satan's daughter. I beg you, brother Abel, flee this luring woman of folly, Lilith's sister, the firstborn of Satan, and follow me in friendship." "I will not follow you, O brother Cain, for the burden of proof belongs to you, and the trust that you ask will come from you. If you desire to speak of these matters, you may do so. I am curious to these allegations, but you will follow me this time, O dearest Cain. Indeed, brother, I will follow you, and I will tell you how I have defeated Satan, and how I have seen his person, and I have learned of Lilith and Aquila. Lead on, and I shall follow you." Abel had something in mind. He knew where he would go. He knew he did not have much time, for to him life was a bubble which at any moment could collapse. Abel took Cain through the water to a place at the bottom of the turquoise. Where the light penetration was almost negligible, there was a little bluff with planets growing out of the cliffs, and the light there, like dusk on a winter's day, the reflections meandering upon the waters, rippling with tiny sparkles glimmering. As they came around the bluff, Abel showed Cain a step of rock, precariously stationed in the crevice of a glen bottom. This was a step that Cain would not ere long forget, for that step led to another, and that to a place which only Abel knew. The trust belonged to Cain, and he made it good with Abel. Cain and Abel walked for many miles. It seemed ascending the steps at first, but eventually climbing to a bridge. The bridge extended from the top of the bluff towards the lighter turquoise waters above. Abel knew where he was taking Cain, and Cain talked to Abel as they went. Cresting the summit now, Cain was in absolute awe. It was paradise for sure, a place that Cain had always desired, but regrettably only if he could create it for himself. He had never been one for handouts. Yet some things were changing for Cain now. His heart had softened greatly since leaving Lilith, and now he began to release those feelings of pride for love. But Cain could not speak for his awe, but followed Abel. The rolling hills of flowing grass as green as the brilliant marsh on earth, but even more wonderful was resplendent with peace. Cain felt secure here, not frantic or pressed, but restful and calm. All the experience Cain acquired in life seemed meaningless to this total peace. No knowledge or issue was important or recalling to his mind. All crises were no longer impending. The walls of responsibility that Cain had made around him, they were no longer necessary here. A feeling of absolute security from ill was present. Nothing was out of balance in this world of serenity and harmony, where the animals and nature's beauty were cohabitating together with the wondrous rhythm and cooperation that all seemed right in heaven and earth, and nothing evil was luring. Abel showed Cain the flowering lilac, and they smelled its fragrance. Together, like little children again, long-lost feelings of their innocence settled within their being. Mr. Cottontail was at home, and he greeted them as a cottontail would, with dignity and grace. That was becoming one of their splendid species. But the pleasant fellow seemed to have something else to say. Why, it just wouldn't be polite to leave without introducing the young'uns. This is Flopsy, he pointed, with his nose towards the ground. Sure enough, out from behind his tail, that little fuzz of a thing was peeking, a short little rabbit. His brother Mopsy was feeling kind of shy, and so could only find the courage to speak out from behind his mother briefly. Miss Cottontail was sitting over towards the lilac bush. "What do you say, Mopsy?" she insisted. Hello. He Mopsy was finished. Tucked his little fuzzball tail between his legs as best he could, and then he made a quick dodge behind his mother again. Cain was delighted with joy. Abel, too, was taking in the beauty, almost forgetting why they had come. Off down the hill Abel went on, and Cain, in his state of wonder, he followed. Approaching the bottom, now Abel hesitated. "Stay here, my brother. I'll be right back." So Abel parted through the daffodils towards the sword. There it was. Abel had found his destiny. It was his job to pay vengeance. He would use that sword. He would get back at Cain, poor, pitiful Cain. Then maybe Aquila would see that together they could leave atmosphere proper and they'd live here. He would show her that this sword could be used for his own purpose, and he would never, ever do harm because he could not ever hate his beautiful wife as she had thought. Abel grabbed, pulling the sword now freely. Oh, wonderful place this was. Oh, yes, wonderful fate indeed. God would provide such methods. Abel stood looking at the sword. It glistened brilliantly. The shining blade was mesmerizing. Abel raised his eyebrows, and then he blinked slowly. He was feeling kind of dizzy, but he knew what he had to do. He ran quickly towards the edge of the daffodil patch. Cain was facing toward the hillside, paying no attention to what was about to happen. Abel lunged at his brother and fell upon him with his strength. The sword pierced Cain's heart through. Cain cried out, "No, my dear brother, no! My God, receive thee my spirit!" And he expired. Abel stood over Cain, his eyes wide. "Get up, Cain. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. Oh, wretched man I am, for I have killed my only brother, my friend." Abel's mind began to feel something strange. It was as if that sword was magical. Abel's heart was stirring. Great tears were welling up within his eyes. Abel collapsed upon the ground, sobbing uncontrollably, falling upon his brother, and he wept. "Please forgive me, my brother, my friend. I cannot forgive myself." And Abel cried himself to sleep, lying over his brother. Hours passed, and Abel still lay sleeping. But as Abel began to awaken, he felt very strange. Where was he? Who was he? He was no longer in atmosphere. The rolling hills were gone. They were replaced with surroundings quite familiar to Abel. This was Earth. Abel could not explain it all, but he knew that he was home. He lifted his head from the ground where he lay. Where was Cain? No sign of him either. It was like everything in his memory was just a dream. All he had experienced was fading. There was nothing was the same. There the old sun disk was going down over the backdrop horizon, the memorable phantasmal colors of Earth, the breeze blowing through Abel's hair, like a lingering memory of some fading dream of weird worlds and unmeaning places. This was the plain where Abel had dwelt. This was his home. But Abel heard something which was not so familiar. It was a very eerie sound. There was some funny little giggling noise mixed in. Hoo, ha, ha, hoo, hoo. Like a mocking wind, like a passing jeer, a spirit with contempt. "Who's there?" Abel hollered, looking in all directions curiously. He was frightened. Then out from behind a rock sprang Aquila. She flew up with lightning speed, as though she was filled with some tremendous power she had not heretofore attained. Abel dodged his head, as though expecting her to come flying straight at him, but instead she flew straight up. then perched upon the wings of the wind as if it were. Ha ha ha! Thank you, my husband, she said mockingly. Thank you for freeing my spirit. I am no longer bound by your awful commandments. I am now filled with life and power of my own. We are no longer one. Now we are two. I am myself forever free and living. But, I don't understand, Aquila. I was just not long ago within atmosphere. I remember distinctly. I took the sword, the one you were so frightened of. I wanted to prove to you that it was not dangerous for you, so I thrust it through my only brother and friend, and now I'm struck with grief. I'm seeing an apparition. Yes, I must be imagining you. No, silly Abel. It was not Cain that you pierced. 'Twas me, your beloved Aquila. I knew you would never kill me, for you could not be willing to part with such a pretty woman as myself, and you loved me with an everlasting love. Yet, for to be pierced was my wish, you see. The sword is that of truth, and 'tis the sword of awakening. Truth awakens reality in all persons, and applied to myself brings eternal and immortal existence. Now, I, Folly, shall reign forever alongside my father Satan. You have tricked me, O wretched woman! And did you disguise yourself as my brother? Yes, for how else would I have conquered you? For even though you have not killed him, and he is still upon atmosphere, you have done as much in your heart, and thus you have balanced the evil in man. A life for a life, and eternal torment and misery shall be yours and all mankind's lot forever, and evil shall reign, and I shall sit as queen. No, no, it's not so, for my God shall redeem my soul from hell, and he'll soon crush you under his feet. Now, whether you speak the truth this time, or as all other times you lie, it makes no difference to me, for I do know that my Redeemer lives, and he shall stand up at the last day. And if the price of my soul be his very existence, he will cause it to be done. For though, unlike your father, who takes life for the advantage of his own, my father does give, and he gives his life on behalf of others, and yet he will make the guilty pay, but those who you have deceived shall be repaid as well. I must get back to my brother, and I must warn him. I must warn him of you and your sisters and their plot. It is funny. I wished for earth all this time, and yet now I long for atmosphere. I must warn Cain. Oh, but you're still on atmosphere, silly Abel. 'Twas me that was pierced, said Aquila. I can go anywhere I choose, but you are imprisoned here in atmosphere. What? But this place, is it not earth? No, Abel, look again, a prissy little Aquila retorted. Abel twisted his neck around, looking at the scene. There was no earth, all right, not even the beautiful paradise of before. The rolling hills were turned to blackened and scorched plains of desolations. The reedy pools in the muddy swamps, and all the birds had fled, and only parched and thirsty ground now lay before him, like an overbaked wheat seed that lays out in the sun too long. Abel got up from the ground where he had been, and he went on. He just started in that direction of desolation. Abel's heart began to feel very full. It was as though he had been filled with every evil experience in life, as though every sin had mysteriously defiled his inner sanctuary, like every transgression ever made was secretly being transferred to Abel's inner emotional being. Once within his heart's confine, it was shut up and found no release. He couldn't just forget it all, for what he wanted in his heart was peace, harmony of feeling. But as long as Abel could not justify all this wickedness, there could be no harmony between the evil that happened and the sense of justice that Abel felt. This was not balanced, the world, as Aquila said. For how could two wrongs make a right? And how could murder stay upon his conscience if he were to continue to hold feelings of love for Cain? feelings of justice and good. Within Abel's heart there was indeed still, yet hanging on that insatiable desire for love and God. The feeling for vengeance was now gone, but a new feeling was there. Not a justice for the wrong of Cain, but for the wrong of the real culprit, Satan, for the evil itself. Each sin seemed to be held within his heart like someone was consciously transferring every care upon his shoulder, like some priest ministering into his heart and transferring all the world's sin into the inner sanctuary of his heart. Would this debt upon his heart be paid? Yes, Abel believed it would. For along with the horror of the feelings, along with the pain, there was also the feeling of faith, a certain faith in an ultimate justice. The feeling was building Abel's heart. The pain Abel felt was cramping and making all and everything seem filthy. Then came the tears, and they welled up under his eyelids as though they knew subconsciously that at some point all this pain would be expiated. It would be again transferred away from his heart through some act. Right now, that act for Abel was crying, the feeling of sorrow for sin. It seemed to relieve his heart somewhat, if only temporarily, and the tears washed away the outer reflections of life's gaze. Finally, Abel began to find the strength to walk. His feet could feel the hard underneath ground, the cracks in the earth pushed up against his soles. There was an ostrich with his head buried in the sand, standing off to Abel's right. Abel stood still to question his gaze. The sun was hot, but it seemed a little like killing yourself to stop the pain, like cutting off your hand because it's dirty. The problem just gets worse. That silly old ostrich thought that because his head was cool beneath the sand, that his whole body was cool. But feeling cool wasn't good enough. The ostrich should have found cover, or maybe he should have left this place. That sounded like a good idea to Abel. He would leave this awful place, where no one paid any attention to the impending doom. But first, shoo, go away, ostrich. It's too hot here. You'll die. But it did no good. The ostrich never heard the plea for flight. A gracious warning, and it was unheeded. At least Abel felt better about the fact that if that ostrich died, it would not be any of his fault. Abel wandered through endless miles of desolation. Soon night would fall, and Abel couldn't find the old bridge which had brought him here. He searched, but the train looked so different. Hours had passed, and finally a cool wind was beginning to blow on Abel's forehead. Surely he would find the trail before it was completely dark, but this place, it seemed very familiar. Had Abel been going in circles? There was a dark mound in front of Abel right now. A strange mound. Abel couldn't think of what it could be, so he approached it slowly. Was it a wild animal couched in some stance? Would it lunge out at him? When he got near it, he probably should have gone around, but for some inner reason, Abel had to know what was there, or maybe it was just some instinctual feeling of having to prove he wasn't afraid. Sometimes a man has to prove that to himself. He just pursues a hidden danger, knowing inherently, or at least feels logically sure, that there are no mean and wild beasts which could possibly dare attack him. After all, he was a man, king of all domains. If this wild world wouldn't submit to kindness, he would peer upon it as though before God and searching spirits. He was astonished with such betrayal, surprised at the wayward course of nature, for that is exactly what nature would have to be, wayward, though it need prove itself in order for Abel to believe. Though he had a fear of it being so, he needed more proof, and then substantial experience. After acquiring this, he would have more reason to feel self-pity, more reason to question nature's goodness, a sort of purchase price for answers that he hoped he would get from God. Abel's head seemed dizzy. He felt like whatever he was doing wasn't real. Wherever he was must not exist in actual existence. Or at least he felt a subconscious belief. And while his outer consciousness held on fast to the acceptance of what appeared to be reality, the darkness made thoughts seem interdimensional. There were two people present there, he and his thoughts. He would question, and then his thoughts would find some rational for the query. Was this real? What is this mound? Is it living? Oh, surely it's a rock, some petrified dung heap. Not a trick which nature was playing on him. No, it was perfectly natural for a rock to be sitting in the middle of nowhere. But, it is not actually nowhere, unless Abel too was actually nowhere, and if nowhere existed. But he must find it meaningful, not so meaningless. Nearer and nearer Abel approached, but that thing just sat quiet, possibly a rock. But what of this strange smell? Where of the heat that emanates from its body? But the thing, or whatever, it didn't move. Abel knelt down, listening. He heard a sound coming from that place now. A small squeak, squeak, like a baby sucking its mother's breast. A sort of sucking, or even a little chewing sound. Flap, 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 flap. Abel jumped back and almost doing a flip in the air like a cat when it's startled, his heart pounding out of time. Though startled, Abel knew now what it was. That old ostrich. He had sat out in the heat all day. The sun had killed its victim. And now a night bat was feasting perversely upon his blood. Still warm. Such tragedy. A quiet ending to one of nature's ignorant peasants. And the brutal took advantage, as it lived upon the life of that small minority. Abel was very confused. Where was he, really? Was it paradise as it had first appeared? Was it hell as it now resembled? Was he anywhere? It was almost like a place of nowhere, a place like a limbo. He couldn't go on and enjoy life. Not only because of the fact that he was actually imprisoned here, but also emotionally. He couldn't find rest until justice was found. Life had been perversely tricked. Something had entered life precariously, without welcome. Just then a voice shattered out from the plains. "My son! My son!" "Here I am!" cried Abel. "How long, O Lord, holy and true, are you refraining from judging and avenging our blood upon these who dwell upon the earth?" And the Lord spoke out of the cloud mass. "Abel, my son, you must wait a while longer until your fellow slaves and your brothers have been martyred as you have been. You will rest, for it goes just and right for you." "But Lord," cried Abel again, "where am I?" "Cast your eyes about, Abel. What do you see?" "I see desolations, Lord." "No," said the Lord. "You see only your own heart. You must rest in hope, my son. My promise and my very word has cleansed your heart. For though you see desolation now, know that I shall truly avenge that which is lost, and that knowledge shall lift up your soul and purge thee from sin. Justice, when it is accomplished, shall bring about righteousness, and righteousness in turn, blessedness. But you may acquire this blessedness now through faith. It will take away that stony heart and give thee a heart of flesh. That is why I say, rest a little while longer, for indeed you shall rest. Now, Abel, look around. Tell me what you see." "I see paradise as before, Lord." "And thus it is for those who have faith in my word, saith the Lord. For it shall go well with them. Yes, happy are all those who die in union with the Lord from henceforth. And this place you have created through your faith in my name, it shall be the abode of the righteous, from now on until I shall call you from before my throne the last day. It shall be the bosom position, for it is the place of my bosom, and that place of what is seen in a righteous man's bosom. For out of a righteous man's heart goeth forth righteousness by faith. True, I said of thy father Adam, in the day that you eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, ye shall die. Yet I have redeemed the righteous by mine only begotten, and those who are of him shall enter in by faith. Though ye have not yet been judged, nor has the earth indeed, nor has wickedness ceased, yet in faith you see your sanctuary cleansed and paradise redeemed. You shall abide in this place, and your faith has blessed you. Abel questioned God further, saying, Lord, is this place real, or am I only imagining it? God answered Abel, faith is the real substance of things hoped for, the evident demonstration of reality. This place you have seen is the actual appearance of your heart's abode, and the true substance of that abode, the evident demonstration of reality. Adam could not dwell there then because he had disobeyed me, but you have had faith in my word. To you, and though I have not redeemed all men, I have redeemed thee through your faith. And though you have understood that you could not redeem thyself, you have believed that I could justify you. For you have perceived that mercy is the end of the law, and you knew that justice would be the result. And by the faith in your heart you have taken possession by faith. For I am the divine being. I make the dead alive, and I call those things that are not as though they were, because I have promised, and I am also able to do it. And then Abel, he fell back to sleep. The voice of the divine faded in Abel's mind. Abel felt at peace. He had come to know his divine being through faith. And that certain feeling of sin and guilt, it was removed. This place was paradise. It was home, or the true substance of home. The quieting voice of God, the divine being, had stilled that fear. And in faith, Abel accepted the divine being's promise. And every one of his thoughts, absolutely infatuated with every whim, he became enmeshed entirely within the immortal bonds of wisdom. And he went to sleep. It had been Aquila which had brought Abel to the knowledge of ideas. Those ideas which he seemed to bring out from within him, that comforted him and fulfilled him. Were not those inventions good? Did they not better his life, as well as Adam and Eve's? Had it not been for the soft clothes, Adam and Eve would still be wearing those difficult leaves, were it not for Aquila. It was after many years had gone by. The end of the next 700 years was approaching. The time on earth was progressing with oddness. Many things had happened. Many angels and demons had incarnated and left the earth. The first age had passed. The second age was coming to a close. Adam had begun the first age of man. He had eventually gone back to the heavenly city and watched his children multiply on earth. But now the earth was entering the new age. It was going to be an age of promise. Important things would need to transpire. God's great plan would take its shape. Adam, Adam, God called from the heavenly splendor. The time has come for you to enter the next gate. Adam walked purposefully toward God's throne. He knew what was about to happen. God had instructed Adam on many things, about the plan of salvation, about his many trials to come. Adam was ready now for the next adventure on earth. Adam was even told where he would be incarnated, who would be with him, and how his destiny was established. Adam did not want to leave Eve, but he knew that he would now lose Eve for some time. He knew that he must experience this separation, and there was no way out of this great karma that he had initiated. All he could do was have faith, and this he had. Adam bent down before Eve. Tears were swelling up in his face. He put his head upon her breasts, and he just rested there. Many of the angels wondered about such great love. Eve held her husband. She stroked his hair. She also knew their fate. Adam and Eve held each other silently 3 days. And then Adam finally looked up. "My love, this is the hardest thing I've ever done, to leave you. If I should die 1,000 deaths, I know this will be the hardest thing that I will ever do, to leave thee. I love thee, my sweet Eve." Then Adam parted. The cherub escorted Adam to the vortex of swirling colors. Adam went in through one of the 12 gates. This gate led to the next fate. He closed his eyes and he walked through. As Adam went through the gate, the angel escorted the prince to his destination. The veil placed upon his mind. Adam was now in the second gate of existence, the great majestic prince, the great Michael. He was born on earth as the man named Shem, son of Noah. When Adam was born on the earth, his father called him Shem. This meant the name, or the one who should be great. Noah had been shown in dreams who the boy was. He understood his mission. Noah was to be the protector of this son. Noah had a great destiny. The world was about to enter a time of great change and rebirth. The coming age of man, much like the first age, with Adam and Eve and the populating of the earth. After Adam had died and had returned back to heaven, the earth had become lost. For almost 1,000 years, Adam had ruled the earth. He had provided direction to his children. He had given the earth a calming presence. When Adam left the earth, the Nephilim had begun to go astray. The Nephilim were the angels who fell from heaven. They once had stood with Satan. They had been greatly deceived, and their minds corrupted by the logic of Satan. When they came to the earth, their hearts became very sick, and their minds were very deceived. They forgot entirely who they were. Their minds brought the world a great veil. Shem was walking along the paved roadway that encircled the outer gates of the temple. It was a most magnificent temple, the most and the greatest temple the earth has ever known. The outer gates with the pillars were 700 feet high. The temple proper, not including the city of Atlantis, was 50 square miles, the jubilee of miles. The center of the giant crystal palace was of pure transparent glass. The middle was a perfect sphere, 360 feet in diameter, and around this sphere were another 12 spheres. Each were also perfectly round and each 360 feet in diameter. This holy place was designed by the greatest architect of all time. But the design was from the council of heaven, directly from the great priesthood. The ancient wisdom was incorporated into the actual measurements of the edifice. It was based upon the original priesthood knowledge of Atlantis. At that time, the great priesthood had built the city with a pure Adamic knowledge of the divine being. And the divine being had bestowed that knowledge to Adam on earth. The language of Adam had been the perfect language of humankind. There was no division of knowledge into separate sciences, but all the knowledge was one harmony. Language was written by symbols that incorporated both the words and the numbers of science. Even musical notes were understood by special arrangements of the ancient symbols. The symbols were also not arbitrary, but integrated into the very reality of the physical world. The symbols of science and language was not really contrived, but was of natural means. Nature itself provided the natural symbols, the knowledge of which may bring a man into touch with the comprehension of the other worlds. All things on earth have patterns. They are the patterns that not only mimic the greater cosmos, but also bring into harmony the many seeming incomprehensive powers and all the laws of nature. The tiniest elements have laws that govern their behavior, just as the earth itself has laws that govern it. And by this ancient knowledge, these two planes could be understood, and the entire understanding of the universe could be known. The temple had in its design the mathematical dimensions, which, if understood properly, can harmonize man's knowledge of space and time itself. The center circle represents the universe in its absolute state. The 12 spheres that surround the inner sphere represents the ratio of the one to the expanding universe around the first principle. And this ratio is the supreme ratio of creation. It was the Enochian cube. Then built around this great design was great beams made of pure glass, each beam making a glistening frame-like structure that with mathematical precision divided the first principle of the one sphere into all the primal patterns that the universe naturally forms, the crystal patterns of creational mathematics. There were built first on top of the Enochian cube of circles the two triangles, each facing opposite directions. This also formed a six-sided star. This star was built of pure glass and formed another sacred room. Now the first and the most sacred room was entirely round, spherical. The 12 rooms built around this sphere were also spherical, and they were sacred. And into these rooms only the 12 high ambassadors would go. This was the bottom floor of the temple. The second floor was the two triangular compartments that we spoke of, each facing opposite directions and forming the sacred geometric star. The star was the symbol of the sacred six. In the center of this great star was another sacred room. This building, occupying the center of the star, had built atop it was a great pyramid. The pyramid had 4 equal sides and came to a perfect pinnacle. On the top of the pinnacle there was a perfect emerald. It was the largest emerald one could imagine. This pyramid was the hall that in the many hundreds of years it stood, the people of Atlantis came to learn and petition the high priesthood of the divine being. Shem was walking now on the paved work that circled the great temple. The paved work being laid with pure marble stones, there were very few people walking on the road. The great temple had begun to fall into disuse. Now there were only 3 priests left, and Shem was now only an apprentice. He was the only child left suited for the priesthood. Much trust was being put upon him. The earth was becoming very corrupt, and the ancient knowledge would be lost very soon. Enoch and the elders had all been taken in the great craft many years ago, and now hardly anyone in Atlantis could remember the age of knowledge in the kingdom of the Adamic elders. Shem looked out at the ancient city of Atlantis. Wow! Even after these many years, it could take your breath away. The city stretched for miles. The buildings were very high and most made of glass. Shem watched the busy commerce of the city go by. The traffic, though cluttered, was also astounding. It was fascinating to see the many jettisoning vehicles flitting around like the bees around the hive. There were many varieties of transportation, vehicles traveling high and low throughout the towering buildings of crystal. And at night the towers would glow beautifully in beautiful colors, and they would shine warmly and also brilliantly, for as far as the eye could see. Atlantis itself was greatly populated with millions of people. In the city center, there were about 1 million people. Many of the people were very old. The oldest man living was Methuselah, and he lived in the temple in the middle of Atlantis. He was 900 years old. Some of the crafts in the city were not human transport. Some of the craft were able to leave the earth and its gravity and travel to other worlds. While everyone on earth knew about these, there were very few, actually, who ever were allowed to walk on these crafts. The crafts were from other planets, mostly from Mars, some from Jupiter too. And besides this, no one now really knew. The people who were arriving on these great ships were not actually welcome here in Atlantis, and the crews of the crafts were now causing great alarm to the high council of Methuselah and Noah. Shem had known all of this because he was Noah's son. He was a prince. But he did not know what was about to happen now. What would become of the earth? Who were these invaders? Why had they come to the earth? Well, the invaders were the Nephilim. They were men of fame around the earth. They had come to take the daughters of men, to mine the gold on earth, and enslave the masses of mankind. The trouble became very alarming. Men were becoming evil in their hearts. The love of the divine was being forgotten. The trouble really began on one winter day. Earth had gone through the change. Snow had covered most of the earth. Even the middle regions of the earth had snowfall. The earth only experienced summer 6 months of the year. Atlantis was populated so much for mainly this reason. The men of earth could not live in the northern regions of the planet, and the food would not grow in the cold climates. It was one very cold winter, and the Nephilim had now arrived upon the earth in great numbers. Their minds being the least of the children of God, they quickly became lost in carnal and earthly pursuits and carnivorous games. The sons of Adam had all but left the earth. The great time of this delusion had been ordained, but the divine had carefully provided that the arrival of these brutal minds come about when the righteous of Adam had left the earth. This had been accomplished by the divine being's great design, the great priesthood of the city of Enoch. It had been taken from the earth in a great craft, and all the lineal sons of Adam down to Enoch, the 7 high priests, had been taken as well. They had left the earth prematurely. The sons of Satan were about to arrive on the earth in great numbers, but these wandering angels, like wandering stars, are those to whom is reserved the blackness of the darkness for the ages to come. They were not all allowed at that time to inherit the city of light with Adam and the 7th one in line from him, Enoch. So, for this reason, the city of light, that was the great enlightened abode of men, the place where the secrets of the divine had been taught, the great Atlantis, it was abandoned, and it was given over to corruption. Lamech, the son of Enoch, and Methuselah, the oldest man, were the only ones left in the temple. There in seclusion, they continued to interpret the oracle of the divine. But the great priesthood was being overrun by the sons of Satan, who had not love of deity in their hearts, and who were now caught up with greed, with hunger for power, not the peace of the divine on earth. Now it was one dark winter day when the suffering upon earth had grown mightily. It was the coldest time of winter, and the earth had been bereft of all of its produce. It was as if the divine love had been taken from the earth, and no sun of righteousness was able to shine. The Nephilim came to be in the earth in those days, and these were the sons of the divine, and they began to grow in numbers, taking the daughters of the divine as their wives. They would send the men away into the caves of the earth abroad, outside of Atlantis. So from their race, the race of Mars and the women on earth, they bore the race of the hybrids, the giants. These men were the great ones, of great size, 9 to 13, some 16 feet in height. The earth also was being covered with ice and snow, and it seemed to mock the inhabitants of man. Oh, what severe times the earth was in. Men outside of Atlantis reverted to live mostly in caves to find warmth, and with the lack of vegetation, the hunger was great. Because the earth was covered with ice, there grew little food for man. This problem was also exasperated by the fact that the men were seldom allowed to have wives. They couldn't propagate. So it was on this particular day, this cold, cold day, the people of earth cried, and they cried out for their great hunger, but they received only more ice. Lamech, the son of Cain, had been out gathering bean pods that day. It was difficult, and a difficult search it was. The bean pods were sparse. They grew off the bushes that covered most of the growing desert lands. After a long day of gathering, Lamech had not gathered many pods for his family. And this great famine had spread throughout all of the world, so that no part of the earth was without the famine. The Nephilim were taking over the great city, and if a man wanted to have his wife, he dared not enter the city. Besides, most of the humans were being used as slaves for the mines, and some of the more appealing humans were forced into different various compromising positions. The people of Earth were now looking to their father now for guidance. Lamech spoke to the crowds as they gathered around him. "Brothers, sisters," he said, "I was today out gathering the bean pods, the acacia bush pods. I did not find very many. As you all know, the earth is becoming very cold. The winter is the severest that we've ever had. If we do not find food, we will soon perish, my friends. Bear with me for this I'm about to speak. It is hard for me to tell you. It is very troubling, but I must get through this. On my rounds today, I noticed that something had happened to the earth. It is a new thing, my friends, and it is very strange, a very strange thing indeed. I saw a lion today eating a deer. A lion, he had been hungry, like us, and he had found no more vegetation like he had originally known in the past. The food of the lion is now all gone. The lion has now begun to eat the other creatures. This is very troubling, my friends, but with the snow covering so much of the earth, I fear we are all surely to perish with the vegetation as well." At that, a man stood up in the crowd, a peculiarly short man of only about 6 feet high. The man was old and had a long white beard. The man waved at the crowd and beckoned all to listen. This was Father Noah, the high priest of the divine. "Men, brethren, listen to me. Your father Lamech has spoken truthfully about the earth. The earth is truly perishing. This curse is from the divine above. It is because of our great sin that these things are here. And because of this, we are overrun with these invaders. Men have become very selfish in the earth, and now the very creatures have become cannibals. It's a great sin against the divine, and I fear that this sin will spread throughout the earth, and there will be no way to arrest it. All of you men here must listen to me. The Divine One has told me that the famine shall persist for a long time, first with ice, and then with a great flooding upon the earth, when the ice shall melt. The great divine being has given me a commandment. Yes, the Divine One. He has given us the flesh of the cattle and the sheep to eat. The flesh he has ordained for our use because of this great hardship that we are facing, this famine and this cold, and the invaders in our world. He has shown me what kinds of creatures we may eat, and which kinds of flesh is unclean for us. All the cattle and the sheep may be eaten. Also we may eat the birds of the air, which are not scavengers. Those animals which only eat the vegetation we may eat. Those which eat other flesh we may not eat. Also the Divine One has given us the fish of the waters to eat. Those which have scales and fins we may eat. The Divine One himself has spoken to me in a dream. He is about to destroy this world with a great deluge. The earth will soon be flooded with great waters, and all who will not listen to me will drown. Please, men, brethren, we must build from the wood, the acacia wood, a great box. The box will be sealed and large enough for all who wish to come. We shall be saved from this great cold and this great degradation of nature into another new world to come. Who of you will come with me?" At this, many of the crowds laughed. "Ha, ha, ha! He is insane! This is more incredible." And from the crowd, a respecting man among the sons of Lamech, it was Lamech's firstborn, Abel, who spoke. "Oh, delusional Noah, have you drunk too much wine? Noah, I know that you are filled with great knowledge from the past days. We all know the legends of our fathers. We have all heard the stories of Father Adam and the great city of Enoch. I also know that they imparted to you the knowledge of their ways, and that you have carried this down unto your son Shem. The oracle also has declared that He is the deliverer. He is the second Adam, the MELCHIZEDEK, or the Prince of Righteousness. When the boy has become old enough, he will lead us from this famine. Both this famine of food and that famine of knowledge. And he shall deliver us from the invaders. Father Noah, perhaps you have become too old to think correctly. I have created a portable tent. We can now leave the caves and populate the desert places. Come, people, we do not need any talk of escaping this old world for another world. All shall be well with our own. Another man from the people stood up, and he shouted, "The earth will be flooded with a deluge. Is this correct? And where shall this water come from? The sky? Ha, ha, ha! Look, old man, the water is about to overwhelm you. Run!" He was an immense man. His height was about 13 feet high. Jabal cried out, "Should we make a box? Shall we build a box for all to live inside? And we are to be afraid of the water? If we can overcome the ice, should we be afraid of anything else? My brother has shown us how we may build tents and leave the cold, damp caves. I have invented the harp and the pipe. Look, they make melody. Let's dance." At that, Lamech, son of Cain, stood up again. With his hands, he quieted the people. "My children, brethren, do not be troubled by Father Noah's words. All shall be well. The one thing we have is the acacia tree. We will not cut down the tree that supplies us the food to build a box. The acacia tree is our salvation. It's where the beans are for our soup. Noah, old man, why do you speak these nonsensical words? In over 1,500 revolutions of the sun disk, there has never been any water to flood the earth. Have you gone mad?" Lamech was the great-grandson of Cain. Lamech knew very well that the words that Noah had spoken were very true. Lamech knew of the truth of many things, but he just couldn't accept the things that he knew. Maybe Lamech was jealous of Noah. Many of the peoples believed God had chosen Seth as their heir. Even the Nephilim had chosen the temple of Atlantis more than Nod. The temple of Nod was still standing, and the priesthood of Cain was now almost extinct. Only Lamech now was aware of the